The Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by italki. Become fluent in any language.
Good morning. Good morning. Morning. So, we as humans, we are never satisfied. We are constantly trying to get stronger, better, faster, right? And all of that is a good thing. Constantly seeking self-betterment for the sake of human flourishing is always a worthy cause. But very often, we get stuck, we hit a wall, we get frustrated, and we don't know what to do next. And then we tell ourselves things like, if only I tried a bit harder, if only I had more talent, more object X, or very often we tell ourselves, maybe I'm just not good enough. How many have said that to themselves? Yeah, we all do. But what we should actually be saying is, we should look up from around the world we live in as polyglots, and look at other disciplines, look at the world around us, and learn from other people. This means stealing is a good thing. Does anyone know who this is? The famous Russian composer Igor Stravinsky. I can't speak Russian, but he always said, lesser artists borrow, great artists steal. And he's one of the big composers of the 20th century, so you can imagine. When he premiered one of his pieces, The Rite of Spring, Le Sacre du Printemps, in Paris, there were riots. But now in Paris, he's one of the most respected, interestingly enough. Polyglots and musicians are very often the same. This is Oscar Ghiglia from Italy, a friend of mine, with my own teacher, Elliot Fisk, the last student of Under Segovia, in Aspen in 1975. Among the both of them, they each speak at least 5. It keeps changing. And being a musician and a polyglot, according to Elliot, I called him before this talk just to get some facts from him, and said he was fascinated at what I was going to bring to the table instead of being taught by him. And he said, among the world's musicians, it's very common to be multilingual and at least speak 2 languages. There are others, such as Ton Koopman from the Netherlands. So he is a conductor, a harpsichordist and organist, a person of early music, very well known and respected. There's Andras Schiff, the fiery classical pianist. If you have not heard of him, you should go see him live. And of course, Hopkinson Smith, the American lutenist that is currently in Basel, Switzerland. But that begs the question, what do they do different from us? What makes them able to be polyglots and do music? Music is a monster in itself. I should probably introduce myself. As you can read in the bio, my name is Fiel Sahir. I'm an Indonesian-American classical guitarist, and I am currently studying in Düsseldorf. A lot of you may be wondering, I thought you should go to Spain for a guitar. Fortunately, that's not the case anymore. All the Spanish guitarists are outside of Spain, and yeah, so I talked to my teacher Elliot. I wasn't sure if I should be doing what I was doing, if it was right. And he said, well, let's think about it a bit. So I did some praying and I did some thinking. And the conclusion he came up with is, why don't you try my protege who's currently in Düsseldorf? Sure enough, the year he told me, he came to Boston for the guitar festival that we run there. So props to Judith Smith and everyone that's on the team. It's a lot of work running a festival, I can tell you. And I met him and he said, all you have to do is learn German. And long story short, now I'm here. So how do we do it? How do we do it is the big question of today. A lot of times when we do something, and this is very often the case of humans, is we do it to gain a name for ourselves and to earn some money along the way. Not bad, not bad. But very often that is our roadblock. We need a change of heart. You don't change music, it changes you. You don't change languages, they change you. Start from zero. You got to remember that it's okay to not know the answers. It's okay to be humble and be vulnerable. That's what accountability is for. That's what we all in this community are for. We learn from each other. If you know all the answers, you can make your own polyglot conference and run the whole thing, because you should be teaching us instead. You should be up here with me. Yeah? And you also do not reap in the same season that you sow. This is a big rule of life. It takes a musician hours and hours, months of practice. You think we don't get frustrated? We have no choice, but we know that at the end of the day, it'll come. It'll come. Immersion. Musicians are constantly about living the zeitgeist. We are constantly going to museums, going to the countries we go to, the countries of the composers that we are studying, the contemporaries. If you like early music, for instance, and you like the lute, you will like John Dowland, who's from England, which means you will probably read Shakespeare. They were contemporaries, and Shakespeare loved Dowland, for instance. We constantly are immersing ourselves. We have all done that. I'm sure many of you have done that for languages that are not spoken in your area. I did that for French when I was in high school. I brought parrots to my bedroom, and I had never went, and I never thought I would go, and eventually I did. Another thing, teachers. How many do italki or have teachers in general of any sort? Yeah. Teachers are important. They're great people. They're not to be frowned upon, and you shouldn't look down at somebody because they have a teacher. You are also your own teacher, and you can be your own roadblock, right? I'm not here to preach at you, it's just my take on it as a musician. So, teachers are and should be jokesters, they should be historians, they can be your parents. What they're there for mainly is to teach you to be slow to speak, slow to anger, and quick to listen. That's the most important thing we can do, is always listen to other people and argue later. In fact, you can argue now, and that's okay, because they will understand, and they'll say, give it a few minutes, you know? We don't always know the answers. Teachers can also, most importantly, be your best friends. So, areas of training. What do we musicians do? There are some rough equivalents that I've managed to find out myself. Very rough. So, for instance, we have practice, technique, music theory, ear training. Practice, for us, is a huge word. It can mean the time you physically spend with your instruments, spend exploring the zeitgeist, spend doing technique in music theory or ear training. What does that look like in the language world? Study accent reduction, grammar, or vocabulary. Boring, right? No, all important, all important. And it's all good for you. Practice and study. For a musician, this is our 9 to 5. A lot of my friends ask me, wow, that must be really fun. You just play a box of wood all day with 6 strings? Must be easy. How many of you play instruments? Right? How many of you can tell me that it's easy? It's not easy, especially when you are Asian. This is our 9 to 5, like I said. This quote is by the wonderful Benny Lewis. It's a paraphrase, but you only get better at what you do. We as language learners, and I did this myself, is sometimes we just read books, and then we expect that one day we'll wake up and be able to meet that German person and have a conversation. How many of you are like that? No? Okay, you can just raise your hand in your heart, it's okay. But we're all guilty. This is something we all do. You only get better at what you do. But here's another thing. Who has heard practice makes perfect? Unfortunately, that is also not true. According to Douglas Yo, the former bass trombonist of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, who is friends with John Williams and played in a couple of the things, you know, so it's a big deal. Star Wars. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Obviously, we will never be perfect, but we can always strive. Technique and accent reduction. When musicians practice technique, it can be really grueling just doing scales, arpeggios, moving your fingers back and forth, right? It seems useless, but it's unfortunately not. Fortunately, it's not useless, sorry. It's like accent reduction. Accent reduction, so when we practice technique, what we're doing is we're molding our hands to do things they're not naturally made to do. How many of you have a friend that was born playing the violin literally from the womb? His hands were they just stuck to the, no, nobody. I wish I was like that. I mean, that would be cool, you know, you wouldn't even have to try. But same with our accents. Nobody is born having an accent in another language without trying. And how many of you know that your accent is not that great and you want to improve? You have to actually try to improve your accent. You can't just scurry along. You have to be intentional. Being intentional is a good thing. It's very important. Music theory and grammar. 2 things that make me sleep. Right? Music theory can be quite boring. And so is grammar. I mean, I know there's a few people that love grammar. Props to you. You are the heroes of the day. Like, we need people like you to remind us that it's important, right? Yeah, music theory is important. If you don't know music theory, you can't look at the music and understand what the composer was trying to do, all the little genius intricacies that he was trying to tell you. You can just look and say, oh, tons of black dots on the page. Looks nice. But you won't get the essence of that chord. Examples. This is already on. Let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to play some examples on the guitar, for instance. So, if you have the sentence, I Sunday want to eat bananas. How many of you understand that? All of you, right? It's understandable, but it's still Tarzan. And if you know Benny Lewis, he loves this stuff, right? It's good for you. At least you're speaking from day one. But the problem is that's not grammatically correct. Everyone will understand you, but what you're really trying to say is, I want to eat bananas on Sunday. Right? Yeah. But you can make it even a higher level up, step it up, make it sexier, and say, I want to eat bananas on my Sunday. So for instance, we have 3 chords here. Let's put this down. Let it not roll away. So for instance, if we have the F sharp major chord, which is F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. So I don't know if any of you know music, it's okay if you don't. You will hear the example and you will understand. F sharp major, if we want to stay in the key of E for instance, or me if you're in Europe, for most of Europe except Germany, you will not play the chord F sharp major because that will make you change and modulate. So for instance, this is F sharp major. Completely major chord, kind of happy. F sharp minor, which drops the A sharp and makes it an A. Hear the difference, and now there's a fly. Okay. And then there's the F sharp minor 7th chord, which seems kind of complicated, but this is what it sounds like. Right. So, again, I Sunday want to eat bananas in the context of this chord progression. You're changing, you're going somewhere. F sharp minor. Yeah, getting somewhere. But now, be sexy? Does that make my point clear? Grammar is important. I know we hate that, but again, what is the lesson of the day? Humility is great. Ear training and vocabulary. How many of you like to watch movies with subtitles? Good. If you have ever worked at Asimil or Classical, for instance, you know that they make you listen and they make you have the text in front of you at different points in time. This is good. Why? Because it trains your ear to hear what's going on. Now, in music, for instance, in ear training, your ear does not grow. You're not able to hear different intervals in music if you don't tell your ear and correct it. So how does that translate to music, language learning? You need the subtitles. You can take them off. It's like training wheels, you know? Not everyone is able to go without training wheels. If you are, props to you. Some people are able to. But ear training is really important. It can help you tell the difference between a major and a minor chord. So why don't, going on. Now, some practical advice. We're all here for that. You know, all of you are like, oh, what's this music thing? Is it gonna be just listening to songs and getting the lyrics, which is all good. Susanna Zarajski is awesome. But of course, we want the real practical stuff. What do the musicians do? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. How many of you have heard that before? Good. How many of you know that it's not actually Albert Einstein's quote? All the way in the back, good, cool. Yeah, it's not. The point is, it still stands. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We are all guilty. Musician tools. Number 1, humility is king. Break it down. And imitate, record, take notes, and make it yours. Fermatas and jam. If you don't understand everything, we're going through it right now. Let's go. It's all a game. Not Mario Kart, but rule of thumb, break it down. You should write that down. If there's one thing you take away from it other than humility is king, is break it down now. Everything can be broken down. Your body can be broken down into parts. Those parts can be broken down into cells. Those cells broken down into atoms. Atoms going on, right? Everything, even the little tiny atoms that you don't even see, can be broken down. So can languages. Chip away the little guys first. Now, how do you climb a mountain? One step at a time, right? Everyone knows that, but nobody believes it. Break it down by section, phrases, measures, beats in music. Don't go into a new language and think, oh my God, I have to learn German. How scary is that? It sounds like you suddenly became Angela Merkel, you know, and took over Germany. No, you're learning, yes, you're learning German, but you want to take it a little bit at a time. Little goals, like Ryan Kwong was saying the other day, you know, you got to just take a little step, take a little step. How do we do that? Today, let's say if you're learning one language, language X, today you want to learn how to say, hello, how are you? Introduce yourself. Tomorrow, maybe go to a restaurant and order. Go to the library the next day. Break it down by topic, sentences, phrases, and words. Even words can be broken down into letters, right? So this is a piece of music. I don't know how many of you can see this, but that is pretty scary if you don't know music. It's a bunch of black dots on a page, is it not? Yeah, it looks really confusing. And guess what? There are 2 more pages in this particular piece. The first cello suite prelude from Johann Sebastian Bach, right? And the cello suites actually have 6 movements. So that's a lot of pages of music, 6 black dots. Now, I'm gonna play this on guitar, just the first bits, and you can see how we can break it down. I apologize for being a bit out of tune, but what did we hear? In fact, in this measure, if you can't see, this is a line right here separating the 2 measures, measure 1 and measure 2. This is a repeat of that, sorry. It's the same thing, right? So that's something my teacher always told me, is when you look at a sheet of music, we just freak out and go, how am I supposed to memorize all this? But if you really look intentionally, you will know that composers are not always original. And that's not a bad thing, right? Because some things are worth repeating. You have these measures. Right? That's just the first measure. So always break it down. Don't scare yourself. So how do we do that in languages? We break it down into chunks. So for instance, if we take the word keterlaluan in Indonesian, I don't know how difficult that is to say for you, but that's R's and L's together, right? So this is a very special technique my teacher taught me for music. If I had a measure I could not grasp, he would tell me, play it backwards. Why would you do that on an instrument? That makes no sense. But your brain does wonders. So for instance, what I would do is I'd take it syllable by syllable, or according to him, even you can double or switch syllables and play around. So for instance, luan, laluan, terlaluan, keterlaluan, or even go luan, luan, la, la, ter, ke. Just make it your own game. It'll make you sound crazy, but you'll get the job done, right? Is that worth it? So, or for instance, a very difficult word for English speakers, Eichhörnchen. You can do the same thing. I know Germans have the same with squirrel. Have you seen the video on YouTube? Yeah, it's funny. If you need a cheery day, just go on YouTube. Eichhörnchen. So the same thing. Hirn, Hörnchen, Eichhörnchen. Do it twice, do it 3 times, multiply, change the rhythm. You can go Eich, Hörn, Hirn, Eich, Hörn, Hirn. Something like that. Just play around with it. Be a musician yourself. Make the language into music. Or for instance, I had a really hard time saying significa. For some reason, it's from Portuguese. Or maybe you have a problem with particularly, or je voudrais sortir ce soir. Not easy. I found that on the internet from like the top 10 difficult sentences to say in French. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, right? And I'm not going to try the Welsh thing. That's insanity. Okay. Imitate! Imitate! Imitating is always a good thing. It is not wrong to have someone as your role model. But of course, you cannot be that other person. Duh. But it's good to learn from them. We can always learn from each other, no matter how annoying this other person can be. But of course, it's kind of hard to learn if they're annoying. But, so this is my dad, and you know, when we were a kid, I was a younger kid, he liked to do stuff like this. Why not? Why not? Makes memories, gives pictures, gives good presentations. So, recording process. We all need to record ourselves. We musicians know as a rule what we hear when we play our instruments is completely different from what the audience hears. And for language learners, we need to know that's also true. We may think we have a great accent, and then we'll record it, and we were like, wow, it's actually not that great. I should probably listen to my friend who's telling me, but I just don't want to listen. Humility is king. Sorry, oops. Leonard Bernstein, the composer of West Side Story, right? Composers are awesome people, and conductors, When they take a score, they don't just take a blank score and just leave it as is. No, they write, they color, they use colored pencils to remind them, oh, this instrument's coming in at this moment. I should cue them in. And this thing, conductors are really important people. They can change the way an orchestra sounds. How many have been to see the Berliner Philharmoniker? Not yet? Okay, go. It's among classical musicians, is usually the favorite that everyone talks about. Go see orchestras, see how they work. If you don't understand music, find a musician friend. We're everywhere, especially in the conservatories. All right? So, make it yours. Make it yours. How do we do that? Now, so I'm going to teach you how to use musical notation and apply that to language learning. So again, when we have our words from, like, let's say we have an ensemble book and we're just looking at it and we're saying the word over and over again, but you keep making the same mistake over and over again, write a few notes in. It's not wrong to get your book dirty. It shows that you actually did something. Yeah? You can brag to your friends. So for instance, we have some symbols that I will demonstrate on the guitar. I do not speak Italian, so ignore the bad Italian. Staccato, for instance. To cut off or make shorter, right? And an accent, for instance. Marking notes that are more important than the others, or tenuto. Holding notes longer. And of course, open strings. But how do they all apply in language learning? That's something we're going to talk about now. So for instance, in Indonesian, the K very often is a glottal stop. In the word anak, for instance, you can often tell somebody is a foreigner if they pronounce it as anak, right? It actually becomes a glottal stop, which I use with the staccato marking. So what I would do is I would draw the little dot on top of the K to remind myself, stop it, right? Or for stereotypical Cockney, you know, you say Cockney, I don't even know if that's accurate, but you can shoot me later. Or in American English, we would say, uh-oh, glottal, button, cotton. Nobody says cotton or button because it makes you sound a bit too, I don't know. Or for Spanish speakers, when I was learning Portuguese, I got yelled at by my friend a lot. It's not Spanish! Because of, I would say obrigado instead of obrigado, right? So you can use the staccato marking to remind yourself, pronounce it. Accents. How many people know someone that say bonjour? Right? Wrong emphasis, bonjour. Put the little, that's the accent mark on top of the jour when you're writing. Everyone has something that we do a little bit wrong. Or major, or Massachusetts. Nobody says Massachusetts or Massachusetts unless you're trying to be funny. Or Reagan, no, Oregon. Or if you are not a native English speaker and you see these words for the first time, you might think they're pronounced in the same rhythm. Rhythm is also important in languages, such as infinite and infinity. They're completely different. Photo, photographer. Or I was talking over breakfast with Gareth and Harry here. In America we say yogurt. In England we say yogurt. Or what was it? We say garage, you say? Garage. Garage. Different access stress syllables, right? It's very important. If you really want to have a British accent, put the little accent mark to remind you, because you hear American media all the time. Or synonym marking for words like in Portuguese, there are lots of words that get stressed and held a bit longer. So primeiro, right? So you just write the little tenuto mark over the me part. Or if you're talking to somebody and you want to say alors, but if you say it really quickly, then it just sounds like alors. No, you want to go alors, you know, when you're in the store and somebody tells you that you don't have the product, alors malheureusement, that type of thing. So, or an open note. So, for instance, I use this to remind me to open my mouth, right? So, bossa nova. Oh, it's a different O from English. Or au revoir. That's also another one. Or octopus. Some people might say something different. I don't know. We have more. The first two are great for French, the second for English. A tie indicates a note that is to be held over and let ring. So we use that, of course, for liaison, right? Les affaires. Vous allez bien? Vous avez bien mangé? Whatever. Or a ghost note, a rhythmic note, but no pitch, or background note for ambient music in jazz, or ambience in jazz, sorry. I don't play jazz, so I can't demonstrate that. But, so what you could do is just write the X with the flag. The flag is this thing. Oh, sorry, the stem. Sorry. And so, for instance, in the word des bijoux, you don't pronounce it as des bijoux, right? Or climb, you don't say climb. Half, knie, debit, foreign, salmon. I mean, if you want to, go ahead. But, how did that happen? Okay. So you get the picture. And Wednesday, Wednesday. Froid beaucoup. You get the picture. So just write a little X with the little stem on top of the part of the word that should not be pronounced to remind yourself, or you could just do X's. A flat reduces a pitch by a semitone. So for instance, if I have an F natural, right? If I put the flat symbol, it becomes a flat, which becomes or if we have the sharp symbol, it becomes from an F to an F sharp. So if we have words like on the screen like dumping, dumping, it drops, right? So we want to use a flat symbol to remind ourselves to drop, even though the accent goes up, and if you speak French, that can be confusing, right? Or Cambridge, Cambridge drops, no way. Or in Indonesian, yang benar. Really? You know, oh, it really goes up, but you get the example. So, at sharp, você kind of goes up. Or if you're asking people, why? Right? It goes up as well. Or a French person, bah oui, you know? Or in Québécois, c'est-tu ton chat? Right? The two goes really high up. They always jump. So that would remind you to do the sharp. Rhythms in words. So for instance, we have a quarter note right here, which would be just high, oh, or whatever. Or if you have words such as author, perfect, princess, water, you get the picture. Or words like triangle, basketball. It helps you, and especially in these words over here. So these are 16th notes. And so what you can do is, maybe you don't want to do all 4 of those 16th notes and write that on top of your words and have your friends very confused. What you can do is just write the number 4. To remind yourself to pronounce it as omnipotent instead of omnipotent. If you are not a native speaker, you might do that. Or photographer instead of saying photographer. Or as my parents used to say, interpreter instead of interpreter. Or oregano instead of oregano. Some people might say oregano if they've looked at it at the first time and just want to pronounce. You get the picture. Another thing. So you got all those symbols? If not, you can always message me and I will give it to you, because it's a PowerPoint and I made it myself, and it's not copyrighted, so you can steal it from me and make money. And pay for your Polyglot gathering for next year through that. So, fermatas are your friends. Who knows what a fermata is in music? Good, can anyone tell me? Just, you know.
You stay on the note.
You stay on the note. So, this is really important because it helps you look better than you really are sometimes. If there's a really hard passage and you just can't get from here to here very quickly, and you just have a hard time shifting is a very big thing, you can use a fermata. So for instance, if I'm playing Etude number 1 by Villalobos, Hydro Villalobos from Brazil. So if you saw, I held over on that E. I played that E to give me a bit of time to shift from here to here. I know that's not a big distance, so you're like, what was that about? But let's try it again. So in music, it's all about being expressive. Segovia did that quite a bit. So not only did it help him play better, in a sense, but it also gave emotional space. Sometimes we need silence. I know I've been talking all the time, so I'm lying right now. But fermatas are your friends. What does that mean in language learning? Benny Lewis has something called conversational connectors. Big thing, right? It's learning how to say, I agree, but indeed I find, whatever, just long sentences to give you buffer space to think. Or just learning how to say, like, I know, things like that in the target language that you're learning, to give your space time to think and remember the word. Very important. Of course, another thing, very important, jam with people at events like this. Always hang out with friends. And let's say you're learning Brazilian Portuguese, and you have a bunch of Brazilian friends, and you don't understand jack. It's okay. Hang out with them anyways. Even if they don't talk to you in a conversation, which they probably will because they're awesome people. Just listen. You see this little guy over here? This little Asian guy? He's not playing an instrument. He's just chilling. But he's a part of the jam regardless. He's there being part of the vibe. That's the most important thing, is you're willing to immerse yourself even though you don't feel like you're doing anything. Musicians are constantly playing music and we feel like we're not making any progress. That is our life story. And if we're lucky, we might even get on the concert stage, but that's not the case for all of us. Of course, there's another important thing, is a lot of us, sometimes we think a lot about ourselves, and we, of course, are important. We're our own person, duh. But what is it really all about? It's about really, again, seeking self-betterment for the sake of human flourishing and sharing that with other people. It's not, the world is more than us. As much as we like to believe it, you can argue with me on that, but I'm pretty much sold. It's all about sharing. Musicians are constantly having benefit concerts. We don't often get paid, which is unfortunate, but we're sharing. We're sharing what we do, we're sharing what we love. We play at jails, we play at libraries, community homes, we play at nursing homes. I've done this stuff. We play for our family and friends, and we get ignored a lot, trust me. I have some friends that have gone to win amazing competitions. When they go home, their relatives say, oh, it's Christmas time, break out the cello, break out the guitar. And once he starts playing, everyone's like, so how was dinner? You know, it's like, that's my life story. And I know that's how we all feel as polyglots. It's like everyone ignores us because we're just a weird person that can have more than one language in our head, right? We all share the same feeling. But sharing is really important, and so that's what I'm going to do now. I will play you a piece by Joaquin Turina, a Spanish composer who moved to France to finish his education. And when he was there, he was friends with Manuel de Falla and Maurice Ravel, among other people. And Maurice Ravel was saying, you guys are Spanish. You should be writing like Spaniards. Aren't you proud of your homeland? And they said, oh yeah, right. And so they began to write in the Phrygian mode, which is a mode that came from the Greeks, which went through Spain. And it's a typical, dun dun dun, I'll show you. For instance, we all hear that, right? That's what we think of when we think of Spain, but Spain is much more than that. If you've been there, you know that's true. So, this is the Fandanguillo by Joaquin Turina. Thank you. Thank you. So, Q&A now. If any of you have questions, I will give you the mic. I'm sure a lot of you do. This is good stuff. Don't lose the opportunity.
Hi, so I'm also a musician, and before I started to learn Mandarin Chinese, I always heard people talking about how difficult it is to learn tones. And when I started learning it, I actually found the tones really easy, and I didn't really understand, what the big fuss was about learning tones, and I've always suspected it was because I had a musical background that helped me to pick up the tones easier. So I'm wondering if you've ever studied a tonal language, and if you think there's any relationship between learning tonal languages and musical ability.
If you think it's easy, try Cantonese. Just kidding. I have actually done two semesters of Mandarin, but I never really hit off the ground with it. But yeah, I do think there is a relation. I personally, for some reason, find it quite difficult, but I think even though you find something difficult, doesn't mean you suck. It just means you need to practice. Don't give up at what you do just because you don't get it the first time. We're not all little Mozarts. Even Mozart had to spend hours and hours of his life before he became the boss musician he was, with the pushing of his parents. For instance, this guy right over here, who knows who he is? Paco de Lucia, right? The greatest flamenco guitarist of all time. You know what happened to him? Spain. So what happened was, when he was a boy, his parents didn't have money. He had other siblings. I think he has 3 brothers and 1 sister. And guess what? The family didn't have money to send him to school. So what did the dad do? Locked him up at home, spent 10 to 12 hours a day practicing. Now I know for some of you that's a bit edgy and you're like, I don't like making my kids practice. Okay, fine. The point is to listen to this, right? And he became the world's greatest flamenco guitarist of all time because of this result. Obviously, he was also a genius and above the others in his area, but sometimes hard work is, not sometimes, it's always necessary, right? It's a good thing. So I agree. Somebody came up to me once and was like, your French is really good. I said, thank you. And she said, are you a musician? Yes. Oh, that's why. So, okay, yeah. So yes, there's a relationship, I think.
I was wondering, I've been wanting to get into music theory for a while now. Do you have any resources for someone who's just starting out with that?
Man, I learned everything at school, so I might have to get back to you on that. I think typing on Amazon is always a good thing. Do you have any musician friends?
Yeah.
Okay, so I try asking them. I know some of it might go over your heads, but ask them for the really easy stuff. There's definitely stuff. If anything, don't be embarrassed. Go to your local store and buy a kid's book. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're studying music theory at home. You're not going to show your friends you're studying music theory, right? So, embarrassment is a good thing sometimes.
Thank you.
Next question.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really good. And I don't play any instrument, but I dance. So I guess that it's the same method you put on you use with music and languages. It can be with dance also. Sometimes I see my teacher doing some strange movements, and I like no, and I could never do that. And in the end, after a lot of hard work, I do.
Yeah, it sucks. You sometimes you just never see the end of the tunnel. You don't see improvement for months. This happens to musicians on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You can practice for a month the same piece, right? And for us, we have the language, so we can jump around to topic. But if you're practicing for a concert, it's yeah. I completely agree. Yeah. And there's one up here.
I'm just wondering if you can speak any more to certain types of exercises that you do to practice language that might stem from practicing music. Some quick examples being from my own experience. You know, I'm a musician and I'll use a metronome.
Okay.
And I do the same thing with when I'm practicing pronunciation. I'll start at a slower pace and I'll try and keep that same rhythm, and then I'll speed it up, and then I'll speed it beyond what I would normally want to speak at, so that I can make sure that I can go fast enough and slow back down to a normal speed. Or the same thing with practicing. I'll learn tongue twisters, so just like you would practice an etude that's specifically designed to be hard, so that you get good at that technique. I wonder if you can elaborate more on any other things that come from your experience as a musician that you do to practice.
Listen to him. Yeah, just everything he just said is true. You know, the thing is, a lot of the stuff I just came up with here, I came up with in the last few months, so I'm still working on it. I'm still figuring out how I can make the connection a bit bigger. So I actually haven't tried what you've done. I should use a metronome much more, as I'm sure you can probably tell. But metronomes are good. If you don't have a metronome at home, you can get one online. What it is, it's just this thing that keeps rhythm for you. And robots do not lie, so they will tell you, and that's a problem. They're a litmus test, and it tells you how much you suck at the moment. So you can't argue. You can argue with a human being, but a computer will just tell you, dot, 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 dot. You gotta listen. So do what he says. We stretch ourselves. There's things called etudes that musicians do, right? Etude. And they're specifically designed by the composer to be really difficult. For instance, like Villalobos from Brazil. He made pieces that were so difficult for guitar that Under Segovia actually even refused to play them. But mainly because Under Segovia thought it was a bit too, the harmonic structure was a bit funny for him. But push yourselves to the limit. That's what these etudes are for, and guitarists across the board, we learn them, even though we know they're difficult, because we know it will make us better. Yeah. So I wish I could add to that, but I think you got it. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
This is more of an observation than a question.
Yeah.
I play classical and folk music.
Right.
And play in groups. And I find when I'm practicing at home, I think I know a piece. But when I go and play it with other people, I find they will play it slightly differently. Especially in folk music sessions I go to. It's a bit like a conversation.
Right.
So if you practice at home, speaking to yourself, you think you're saying it right, and you learn from a book, and then you go out into the wild, and you speak to other people, and you find they use different structures, different words, and it's a process of kind of trying to find a common ground.
Right.
So it works with music, it works with language. So you need to get out there and speak to people to find out how native speakers particularly express themselves, and it won't necessarily be as in your textbooks.
Listen to him as well. He has a very good point. It's true. With music especially, you never know what's going to happen. You can practice for hours and hours, you get on stage and it happens to all of us. I've seen it happen to the best musicians. They get on stage and they have a memory slip. And they've played it. This is not the first time. This is probably the 200th concert they've done it. They've done world tours. They have tons of CDs, but it happens. And it happens to all of us. We all will always make mistakes. That's something that is a part of us. And we should learn to accept that. It's true. You meet other people play it differently. You get with a band and you're like, I thought I learned it so well at home. And then it tests your memory. So that's why we do things like playing it backwards. Or we play just a certain section, certain part. Because I forgot to mention this, but like language learners who just read books and expect they can have a conversation, musicians also play this piece from beginning to end, beginning to end, beginning to end. And we expect that somehow it's just going to magically fix itself. The point I'm trying to make here is that musicians, the real good ones that know how to practice, they find it down to the very note. They find where the problem is and fix the problem. They don't practice the rest of it because they can play it. Why practice what you can play is the point that they're getting at. Obviously they will, but they focus on what is the problem. Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I'd like to add, in terms of to these comparisons between music and language learning, in terms of vocabulary, it's like when you're practicing at home, playing scales, arpeggios, and there's a jam session going on, and you are participating, and you are playing, and you are just not sounding jazz, or you're not sounding blues, and it's because you use wrong vocabulary, because those were just scales, there weren't words, really those licks,
right?
And the only way you can learn it is to take part in jams, to listen to other musicians, to how they express themselves through music, through their little parts of what they play, through those licks, and you cannot get that reading books or watching lessons online. It's only when you play with other musicians. It's only when you are practicing with native speakers. There's the only way you can learn the proper way of expressing yourself.
Right, exactly. Listen to him as well. That's 3 people. Don't just talk to me, talk to these other people. Everyone has good ideas. So that's exactly right. Jazz musicians, they constantly are with each other. So for us, if we're learning Brazilian Portuguese and you have Brazilian Portuguese friends, hang out with them even though you don't understand anything. And then take one of them aside and say, hey, listen, I got this word, but I didn't understand. Can you explain it to me? No, he'll do it. Yeah. And jamming is really important. You'll learn the vocabulary from other people from watching. But of course, again, like Lydia and Kirsten were saying, you need to learn yourself. You can't. So something my teacher used to always say is, I cannot practice for you. Your mom cannot learn French for you by herself, and then you suddenly go out on the street and say, bonjour, ça va? It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I wish, there is no limitless Phil. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. Since we're on the topic of music and language learning, I just wanted to share something that happened to me a week ago. So I'm not a musician by any definition, but every couple of months, my boyfriend, he plays bass, and he says, hey, let me teach you something on guitar.
Cool.
I don't usually enjoy these exercises because it just ends up with us fighting.
Happens to all musician couples.
So we started working on this song, and he was showing me, and he's like, okay, just listen and just watch what I do. And I was getting really mad because I'm like, I'm not learning by that. I need to know how many strokes, up or down, count it. Does it end on an up? Does it end on a down? And then I had this kind of flash of insight, and I was like, wait, I know how to learn. I do this with languages. Why don't I use what I do with languages in this case? And I was like, okay, shut up. Just tell me how many, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, up, up, down, down, whatever, He's like, but you need the rhythm. I'm like, yeah, that comes later for me. So what I realized is when we take ourselves out of our comfort zone, we know how to do this with languages, then we do it with music and vice versa. We learn how it is that we specifically need something to be broken down for us. And it kind of switching between language and music, for example, helps us realize what is our method in a way that maybe switching between French and German, you might not actually get it so clearly.
Right.
But it just connected really well with this.
Testimonial. There you go. There you go. Make it work for all of us, and I know the next person has to get up here, so talk to any one of us, and I'm sure everyone has a story in this, and if you don't know music, it's okay, it's never too late to learn. Thank you.